Growth doesn't happen, doesn't stall because of a lack of ambition. It stalls because there's no space to support it. Folks, far too many leaders try to scale faster than their capacity, clarity, or structure can handle. Tonight, we're talking about why most effective leaders create space first. Before they add more, before they move faster, and before they scale. This is the 30. Let's get to it. Well, hello and welcome to the 30, a space for meaningful conversation designed to support your personal, professional, spiritual, and leadership growth. I'm Patrick, and this is a production of the Jackman Group, LLC. I'm really glad that you made the decision to be here. Thank you so much. You could be doing many other things, but you decided to spend the time with us today as we talk about why leaders create space before they scale. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a huge favor. Not only like the broadcast, but also subscribe to our channel so that when we are on, you will be notified. So not only subscribe, but hit the notification button so that you'll be notified every time we're on. If you're watching from LinkedIn, thank you. Go ahead and repost this so that others can get the information that you are seeing. If you're watching it live, thank you. If you're watching it in replay, wherever you are in the world, we want to thank you. Drop us a line, put a comment in the chat, and let us know where you are watching from. We would greatly appreciate it. So let's move on and get this thing started, because I'm excited about this episode, because as the year starts, it's moving. We are in January, moving on to quickly onto February, and we know things are moving. There's a lot of talk about growth. People are talking about how can they grow? What do they need to grow, whether spiritually or personally or professionally? How can they improve? What do they need to do to lead better this year than they did in previous years? We also talk about goals. What can we do? How many goals can we set? How do we set goals? What's the difference between a goal and I don't know, some people call it whatever it is. I look at it as a goal. Some people look at it as something to do. So whatever it's a goal or a plan or resolution, whatever it is, it could be your goal or your plan is to gain more momentum this year than you did last year. You are in the right place, folks, because tonight I want to slow us down just enough to ask you as we begin a different type of question. Not how fast you can grow, but what are you building that growth on? See, before we go any further, again, a topic is why leaders create space before they scale. And you may be wondering, well, what is scaling? How do you define the word scaling? So let's start that. So many think that when we talk about scaling, there's a great misunderstanding about the word scale, right? When I talk about it specific to this episode, to this show, I'm not just talking about growth. I'm not talking about expansion. What I'm truly talking about is what happens when the demand increases, when the complexity increases, and when more people are depending on you more than ever before. That's what we want to talk about is scale. That's how we define scaling specific to this episode. So if you watched the previous episode, the last episode, you might have heard me talk about and said one of the first things intentional leaders, and the last episode was about intentional leaders. And one of the first things intentional leaders do different is this. They don't rush into motion. They take their time. See, in January and February, there's usually pressure to show a couple of things. There are things to demonstrate progress. There's a rush and pressure to prove momentum. But here's what experienced and effective leaders do and what they understand. They understand that speed without clarity does not create progress. I'll say that again. Intentional and effective leaders understand that speed without clarity does not create progress. Instead, it creates noise. So instead of reacting, they pause. They pause long enough to ask better questions. Questions like, what actually deserves my energy this year? What distractions, even good ones, do I need to say no to? What pace is sustainable? Not just impressive. It's not about trying to impress someone. It's about setting a pace that is sustainable from January through December. So what pace is sustainable over time? That's what it's all about. See, this isn't about moving slower for the sake of it. It's about choosing a pace that allows you to lead well, that allows you to be more effective in your leading and as a leader, not just moving fast. Because sometimes when we move fast, we make mistakes. Folks, once you slow down the pace, not just enough to, once you slow it down, not just enough to gain clarity. So when we slow things down, we're gaining clarity, we're gaining traction, we're building sustainability, but that's not enough. See, some other things happens or becomes obvious when we slow things down, not to a stop, but we slow things down to really think, process, reflect, and consider. See, when we slow it down, growth happens. It becomes obvious that growth without space always extracts a cost. So when we slow down, we realize and things become obvious to us. And that one is that there's always, with growth, it always extracts a cost. It comes with a cost. I like to say, in order for you to grow, you have to step out of your comfort zone. And it's not easy to step out of your comfort zone. So that's a cost, right? It extracts a cost because you may be growing, but you're not comfortable. So one of the other costs is that it shows up as exhaustion, a feeling of being reactive in your decision making, and the cost where our calendars feel so full that we're feeling unproductive. Those are some of the costs that it takes. See, a lot of leaders don't burn out. And I touched on this last week. They don't burn out because they lack discipline. They burn out because they've never created room to think. They've never created a space to think. They've never created a space to really reflect and consider what's next. And that's one of the reasons they burn out. So as you are reflecting on this episode, folks, why leaders create space before they scale, it's important to know a couple of key points. It's important to consider a couple of things. Number one, and this is specific to space. Space isn't about empty time. Space is where strategies form. It's not saying, okay, I'm going to create space and it's nothing that's happening, but there's something happening. It's an opportunity where strategy forms. You're giving yourself enough space to start to think and create strategy. You're giving yourself enough time and space to really consider what's next. So it's not where priorities doesn't happen. In essence, it's where priorities get clearer. It's where better decisions happen. It's where better decisions are made. And that's the value of creating space. It's the value of slowing down. See, when leaders skip this step, the step of creating space, now, scale and growth can happen at any time, right? But what happens? So I'm not saying that if you don't create space that you'll never grow or that you'll never scale. What I am saying is that if you don't give yourself space, scaling and growth becomes fragile. Have you heard this, Jim, this saying? It works until it doesn't. What a gem, right? It works until it doesn't. So if we apply this to this concept, this episode, what I'm saying is that if you skip this step, the step of giving yourself space, then what happens is you'll scale, yeah, but eventually you'll get to the point of plateau. So again, I am not saying that if you don't give yourself space, time to reflect and think, I'm not saying that you're not going to scale. Yes, you will. But again, it goes back to what? What happens? You will eventually plateau. You'll reach a point where you can't go any further because you haven't given yourself time and space to get yourself ready for the next step. So, and this is where I want to, at this point, shift. I want to shift the conversation very slightly. I want to shift it from insight because I've given you some insight. I've given you something to think about. But now I want to shift it very slightly from insight to application. I want to shift it from insight to implementation. Because we know that having knowledge is one thing, but application and implementation is something else. See, I can train you and develop you, but if you never apply or implement what you've learned, behavior doesn't change. Your growth becomes stagnant. So we want to move from insight to knowledge to application and implementation. That's what we want to do. So it's important for you to understand creating space doesn't require a dramatic overhaul. It can be a simple process, a simple thought. It could be just a couple of tweaks. It could be learning a new concept. It could be learning a new tool. It could be learning something that will help you to get you from where you are to where you desire to be and where you're called to be. A slight tweak, a new tool, a new, whether you are learning something from, as opposed to doing something manually. It could be learning how to automate some of your processes. Or it may look like protecting yourself and your sanity one block of time each week. So something very slight, making that tweak, right? Controlling your calendar as opposed to having someone else control it for you. Where you have a block of time each week. No meetings, no noise. Creating a space for you to think. Remember, this episode is about why leaders create space before they scale. It's important for you to create a space where there is no noise, there are no distractions, in order for you to move forward and become a better version of yourself. And that's what we are talking about. So sometimes it looks like we are reassessing commitments, because it may come a time where you may have to say no to some things. And some people may be offended by it. They may say, well, you never said no before. You always said yes. But now you're starting to shift your mindset and says, in order for me to get to where I want to get to, as opposed to saying yes all the time, I may have to say no. I may have to stop going certain places or hang out with certain people, reassessing my commitments in order to create more space so that I can scale. Sometimes you've outgrown certain spaces, certain things that you do. So in order to grow, you may have to get a new space or create a new space. So it's asking, what am I carrying that no longer serves where I'm going? So you may have to get out of certain spaces. But that's a valid question that you should ask as a leader. Wherever you are, or you may have to ask it professionally, personally, spiritually, right? What am I carrying now, today, that no longer serves where I'm going? So you have to make some decisions, folks. It goes back to that old saying, right? That old adage. If you continue doing what you're doing, you'll get what you've gotten. It's the definition of insanity. If you continue doing what you're doing, you'll get the same thing. You'll get what you've gotten. So you have to shift some things around. You may have to do something differently. Get into a different space, folks. Create a new space before you can start scaling. So the leaders who grow well aren't always doing more. I'll say that again. The leaders who grow well aren't necessarily doing more. Have you heard the adage, you work smart, not hard? Now they're starting to see, those leaders that are growing, now they're starting to see, okay, I can do some other things. I can be creative in the things that I do, still with integrity. You're not making shortcuts, right? Or you may be making shortcuts through automation, but you're doing it with integrity. You may be utilizing AI. You may be finding out what is the process. So you may be doing a process map to find out What is the current process that we have? And how can we get from the start to the end? What does that look like? What do we need to get rid of? How can I pivot? So the leaders who grow well aren't always doing more. So instead, they are doing fewer things with more intention. So they're more intentional about what they do, as opposed to letting it go with chance or doing things on a whim. They are intentional about going after whatever they're called to do, whatever they desire to do. Intentional and creating the space before they can scale. Intentional about the process before they can move forward. Intentional about creating time for themselves as opposed to having others create time for them. So it's about giving yourself space, again, before you scale. And folks, that's exactly why we've created the Winter 2026 Leadership Intensive. Not just as another thing to add to your calendar, but as a space to step back, to get clarity, and strengthen your foundation before scaling further. It's a 4-hour span of time where you invest in yourself. You invest not only financially, but also with time, where you come together and learn how to create a space before you can scale. It's a focused environment designed specifically to help leaders, entrepreneurs, small business owners, professionals in all aspects, all target markets, all segment markets, to help you think strategically about capacity, direction, and growth before momentum starts to accelerate. Now is the time. You build a foundation now before the momentum starts to move forward, because your calendar is going to get busy. You're going to get busy as the year goes on. You're going to get caught up in being called and pulled and prodded to do more. I want you to take the time. I invite you. So if this sounds like something that you need right now, if this sounds like something that you want to really think about, it says, I need the space right now, because I know next month and 3 months from now, 5 months from now, I may not have the time. So I need this right now to learn more. I encourage you folks to take a look at our Winter 2026 Leadership Intensive. Not just because you're behind, not just because you want something added to your calendar, but because creating space before growth is one of the smartest leadership decisions you'll make. I'll say that again. Creating space before growth is one of the smartest leadership decisions you'll ever make. You don't want to be so busy that now you say, oh my gosh, I don't have the time to do these things. You want to create the time and the space now, this month, January, before growth, right? Space and then growth. Space, grow. So learn now, create a space where you can invest and learn so that you can have the time to scale. And what you've learned, you can implement over the next 12 months. So I invite you to join us. I invite you to be part of this winter 2026 Leadership Intensive. The registration link, folks, is in the show notes. So go, click on the link, register, and join us on January 29th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., 4 hours of your time. That's Eastern time, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And create that space so you can learn and grow and set your own pace for the rest of the year. Well, folks, that's it for now. I want to thank you. As I leave, I'll leave you with this thought. Growth doesn't fail because leaders aren't driven. It fails when leaders scale faster than their structure, their clarity, and the capacity that can support them. So with that said, as this year unfolds, don't just ask how far you can go. Ask what kind of foundation you're building underneath that growth. So before you can put up a house, you have to have a solid foundation. So before you can grow, as I said earlier, you will grow. You will scale. But that growth and scaling can be very fragile. So we want you to have sustained growth. We want you to have growth that goes beyond what you think that you can do. So in order to do that, you have to have a solid foundation so it doesn't come crumbling down. So I invite you to join us to learn some more. Give yourself space. Lay that foundation. So that's about it, folks. Thank you for spending part of your evening, part of your day, your time here with me. And as I end, may God bless you and your family. Be safe. And if you're in these cold temperatures that where we are, where I am, stay warm. I look forward to see you next Thursday. I look forward to seeing you Thursday, January 29th, for our winter 2026 Leadership Intensive. Look at the link in the show notes. Click on the link. Go out to our page, register, and I'm looking forward to seeing your face. It's virtual. It's all virtual. You have people from all over. So join us. See you then.